another edition of Sideline Sports, joined by Jake Malik, Eric Wilson. Jon Shearer's not here this week. He's under the weather. But special guest Gary Myers, one of the best guys covering the NFL. He stopped by to join us. He's written a book with RG3, which we're going to get into in just a couple of minutes. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. What's going on?
Not much. Just trying to get used to Tuesday Night Football.
I was thinking about an hour ago how going back to last Thursday, only Friday night. Friday night's the only night we haven't had any football in the last week. So,
you know what?
I
don't mind it.
I need a break between Monday and Thursday to kind of get recharged for the weekend.
No, thank you. I want football every single day. Give it to me.
I just wish they would flex the games to make them better in prime time, because there have been some horrible primetime games.
Yeah.
Well, this time of year, they have the ability to flex the Sunday night games, which I think they'll be doing is the last couple of weeks. But
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last year the Ravens played the Steelers in a Wednesday game in Pittsburgh. I think it was like 3:00 in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And they, I think the only fans that were allowed into the stadium were literally was a family of the players, and it was so bizarre. I think NBC had the game, and they couldn't show it. They originally the game they wanted to have it at least like 5:00 or 7:00. But NBC was committed to doing the tree lighting at Rockefeller Center.
Right, I remember that.
Yes,
they played 3:00 in the afternoon. So
when you say the tree lighting, that triggers it. I'm like, yeah, I remember that now. That was weird, and I remember thinking the tree lighting is really more important than football, and that's a shock to me because I know the tree lighting is important, but man, football always seems to take a precedent.
Well, I think it was just a contractual commitment that they had.
That could be, yeah.
And I'm sure the football game, probably would have attracted more viewers, but they were just locked into it.
Yeah. All right, so Gary, let's tell us about this book. What was it like working with RG3 on this whole process?
It's funny because the game we just talked about, that Baltimore Pittsburgh game, RG3 actually started that game, and that was all connected. Turns out, unless he signed somewhere, that's the last game he actually got on the field in the NFL because he had a hamstring injury in that game that cost him the last few weeks. But I mean, the impetus to doing this book was all from Robert. He wanted to do a book telling his story. I think the sexual harassment not controversy, but
the allegations
and how unfortunate and unacceptable that is. I think that inspired him to talk about not necessarily what he saw in that regard, but just the things that went on in Washington, and to tell the story of how dysfunctional that organization has been. And as it turns out, he only really witnessed firsthand one incident that you would say is sexual harassment. A scout was saying some inappropriate things to a woman who worked in the team's front office during practice and training camp a few years ago. But the surprising part to me is the sexual harassment he's going to talk about in the book involved himself and how he was sexually harassed by women. Now, I'm not sure at this point whether it was multiple incidents or just one, because we're about 90% done on the book, and it's not coming out till next August.
Right.
But we haven't quite finished that chapter yet for me to understand exactly, what the situation was, other than the fact that he initially wasn't going to tell this part of the story because he didn't want to take the focus off the women at all, but then felt it was important to convey his own experiences there as a means of really exemplifying and illustrating what an awful culture it was in that building. That, and I had never really heard this before. Where, I mean, you hear stories about players going out with cheerleaders, or maybe something going on. People in the organization have a relationship, but as far as a woman sexually harassing one of the players, I had never heard of anything like that before. And I've been covering the league since 1978.
Yeah. Gary, may I call you Gary first and foremost?
I don't know what else you would call me, Eric.
Well, I would call you Mr. Myers, out of respect.
No.
But no, Gary, I appreciate your time. I got to ask you, what was one of the things that really impressed you about Robert RG3 when it came to wanting to tell his story and the two of you collaborating on this book?
Well, Eric, I thought that he was just really open and honest on so many different subjects. He was really forthcoming, and I really enjoyed him. Our first, I didn't know him really personally at all until we decided to do this book together. And my first interview with him, I drove down to Baltimore late October of last year. He's playing for the Ravens last year, and he had a house not far from the facility. And so I thought that, now this is in the middle of COVID, obviously, which we're still in the middle of COVID. But I really thought that it was important for the first time we got together to discuss this book that it was face to face. And, we talked for about 3 hours, and we really developed such a nice rapport during that first meeting that I just said, hey, why don't we just do this on Zoom? Now we've gotten to know each other. Saves me a 3.5 hour drive from where I live down to Baltimore and a 3.5 hour drive back. We're able to do it really spontaneously. If he had some time, he would call me and say, hey, are you available? Let's talk for a couple of hours. So every one of the interviews that I did after the first one was on Zoom, which was a new experience for me. I mean, Zoom is a new experience for all of us. I mean, look what we're doing here. And it was great. It was really just as effective as if I was sitting next to him. And in a lot of cases, I think it was better. Just because, I don't know, when you say, listen, there's nothing that really replaces a face-to-face interview. But if you feel you know somebody well enough and you have each other's trust, just to do it like this, I didn't think I lost anything whatsoever by not doing it in person. And again, I think it made it easier in some regards because it eliminated, me having to travel to go see him or meeting him the night before a game on the road, which last year I wouldn't have been able to do because of all the protocols. But it all worked out fine. And I've told people that Curtis Martin is one of my favorite guys I've ever dealt with. And in a lot of ways, Robert seems like this generation's Curtis to me. That just a really bright guy, very, very aware. In his case, very, let's see, as far as the history of the game, he really understood it. The players that came before him had a good sense of the history of the game. And I just thought it was just a really bright guy that I knew that going in because I'd seen enough interviews with him. But until you're dealing with somebody in a project like this and you really need them to open up to you, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. And he was just great.
So JB, if you got some, go ahead.
No, I mean, so when you first started to write the book, I mean, you've been around the NFL for years. I remember reading you growing up.
Sure. I know. When you first learned to read, you got the Daily News. And
the Daily News was like
who did
newspaper. That was, first thing you did in the morning, you woke up, you opened up the sports section, you read Mike Lupica, the great writers, you guys. That was probably the best sports section I've ever seen. But, what were you surprised to see how dysfunctional the whole Washington organization has become. I mean, we're in their second year. They don't even have a name for their franchise. They're still going under the football team.
Yeah, I think they'll have a name next year. I mean, I actually think I read some stuff that either they have a name or it's narrowed down to the final 2 or 3. Listen, I mean, Dan Snyder has owned the team since 1999. It's basically been a train wreck since about the second day that he owned it. It's just been one thing after the other, and hiring the wrong people. He's involved. Now he's not involved. Now he's involved again. He's too close to the players. Now he doesn't talk to the players. Wants to give the coach full power like Mike Shanahan and wants to take it back. I mean, he's all over the map. He just could never find a winning formula. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like the Cowboys have been ever since Jimmy Johnson has left. You know, Jerry Jones had the good fortune to hire Jimmy, who was just fantastic, and who knows how many more Super Bowls he would have won if he had stayed. But in the last 25 years, when Jerry's been on his own, I won't say they're as dysfunctional as the Washington team is, but, you know, the Cowboys, it's been 25 years or 26 years now since they've been in a Super Bowl. And with Washington, it just never seemed, other than when Snyder brought back Gibbs, who was not the same coach as he was the first time around, but he's still the best coach Snyder's ever had. I thought for that 4-year period that there was some semblance of, you know, credibility attached to the organization just because of how highly thought of Joe Gibbs was as a coach. But, you know, as soon as Gibbs was gone and he hired Jim Zorn and then Shanahan and they had the fights over RG3, I mean, it's been a mess. It really has. And I just don't think Snyder, I think he's a great businessman. There's no doubt. But as far as running a football operation, people in Washington deserve better than that.
Yeah, Gary, I mean, you say it best. It's been a mess. A lot has come out about the team. John Gruden obviously got fired a couple months ago now. I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago, but really wasn't that long ago. I'm sure there's still stuff going to be coming out. I know this is not the intent of this book. I know the point of the book is just tell the story of what Robert went through. I 100% understand that, but I'm sure there's going to be some impact. Do you think that the impact will lead to potentially more people being implicated, more firings, even potentially, as far as to go as maybe Snyder has to sell the team, or is at least it's discussed, or do you think it's just going to be people read the story, they sympathize with Robert, and they kind of just get a better idea of what was happening in the organization? At least,
yeah. I mean, I don't think if Robert knew specific things while he was there, I'd like to think that he would have stepped forward at the time and not saved it for a book. And I really believe that. And truthfully, the example I gave you before is really the only thing that's in the book that he witnessed. So it's not like he saw, somebody from the personnel department sexually harassing any of the women in the organization. You have to remember, like the play, especially the way that their facility is laid out. When you walk in the door there, you go down a flight of steps, and that's where the locker room is. But on the main floor is where the coaches and all the football people are. And occasionally the players will come up to the coaches' offices to meet with the coaches. But for the most part, I say 95% of their time is spent downstairs in the locker room, or there's a door down there that leads to the practice field. So the interaction between the players and the front office is not what you necessarily think on a day-to-day basis. So he wasn't really in position to witness a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, the answer to your question is no. As far as shedding new light on what happened in the sexual harassment, there's nothing earth-shattering here other than him detailing his own experiences here, which are, like I mentioned before, which are very unique. Like I said, that's the last chapter that we're kind of putting the final touches on. and we still have to have our meeting about that one. And how he was in a position to be sexually harassed by women in the front office. We're still working our way through that. So, I can't give you an answer on how that came about just yet.
Got it. And Gary, Robert he was an integral piece, in his time in Washington, and now to go from there to being an analyst, and I know he's, played in Baltimore and played other places. I can at least speak from as being a black man, it's very difficult to, number one, tell your story, but then number two, to have your story be heard in a sense to where your character is not persecuted, if you will. But I wanted to ask you, has he talked to you about what may happen, how people may look at him once this comes out? And if he has, if you don't mind sharing, what has been some of your advice to him as someone who has covered the league for many years and as someone who has, you may not have been down this road, but kind of what to expect?
Eric, I have to tell you, and I'm not patronizing you here, but that's a great question. I mean, that's really a great question. And yes, I mean, it's been a concern of his from the very beginning. Initially, when we decided to do this, let's say a year ago, September, it was all about, hey, do you think this is going to hurt me because I still want to play? And our team's going to say, do we really want to sign this guy? Because are we going to have to worry that he's going to write a book about us? And without other teams knowing the contents of the book ahead of time, how concerned are they going to be that, they're going to be signing somebody that is going to be a lightning rod, not even based on anything that happened with their team, but, from his past experiences. So, my advice to him at that point was, hey, everybody in the league hates Dan Snyder. And I'm not saying that lightly. I know you kind of laugh about that, but I'm serious.
Let me just say this, not to interrupt, but I understand the severity of the situation, and I take nothing that has happened within that organization lightly. I think there is such a negative outlook on this entire organization from the top down that, I genuinely feel like something needs to change. Like Jake was saying earlier, I have said this probably since 2014, 2015. Dan Snyder needs to go. He is not helping elevate the Shield. And, now we have all of this stuff come to light. I am just, it's an internal laugh because it's like, it doesn't surprise me. You know what I mean? Like, there could be a laundry list of stuff that comes out in 2022 about the things that have happened in the Washington football team's organization, and I will just chuckle it off because it won't shock me, because
it's almost expected at this point.
Yeah, it's like, what else? What else? There would have.
What else do you expect from this
right,
clearly riddled with trouble organization?
Right.
I agree.
I would just add it to the list. So,
and the NFL made the Carolina owner, Jerry Richardson, sell his team a few years back. I mean, and if Snyder isn't bringing anything to the Shield, which we all agree he's really not. He's not Jerry Jones, where Jerry Jones at least is advancing the business of the NFL with the LA deal and other things that he's done.
It's not. Let me just say this. It's not so easy to get somebody to force somebody to sell the team.
Oh, absolutely.
Snyder himself. The Jerry Richardson situation was because Jerry was, directly involved in sexual harassment in his front office there, and he basically got pushed out by the league, made a fortune in selling his team, by the way. Snyder, and it only came out within the last 2 years, settled the lawsuit brought by a woman in the front office, that Snyder acted inappropriately towards her on a private plane from Las Vegas back to Washington. And I forget what the settlement figure was, but Snyder claims that his insurance company, threw in the white towel, that he didn't want to settle because he wasn't admitting anything wrong. But running an organization that did enough wrong that it was fined $10 million by the league because of the culture and the sexual harassment. Sure, I think they should have forced him out. And Snyder obviously would fight them in court, and it would be very messy. I keep using that word to describe their organization, but a lawsuit like that would be very dangerous for both sides. What would come out, both during the discovery phase and then what would come out in court. But that's not the direction the league is going anyhow. I mean, they didn't even suspend him. They get his wife is now the CEO, and Snyder's working on trying to get a new stadium. But so he's not involved in the day-to-day stuff because he's not there. But there's nothing that's happening in that organization without his approval, and he's still at every game. So nothing has really changed.
Makes you wonder what's behind the scenes and under all the layers that it's able to go on like this, even with the emails that got released. I mean, it's kind of like a hatchet job was done on Gruden for whatever reason. Not saying what he did was right, but, it's months later, and the only emails we've really seen are Gruden's emails. There's got to be other stuff in there, and they're doing whatever they can to protect those emails for whatever reason. And I'm sure when you're protecting emails like that, there's something in there, because if there was nothing there, they'd have no problem releasing it. So it's almost as though they just want to coexist to protect themselves, the way I see it.
Well, I mean, not only that, but they didn't even require a written report by Beth Wilkinson, who conducted the investigation. She just verbally communicated to them her findings. And then when you think about, I think it was 143 pages in the Deflategate investigation, a silly,
in terms of severity,
waste of time that cost the league $5 million for the investigation, and they produced 143 pages, and there's no paper trail at all of not paper trail, but there's no written record of this investigation. And the only thing that we know that's come out that they don't want to come out, I have to rephrase that. The only thing that's come out of any interest beyond the NFL's press release on the investigation have been the Gruden emails. And I don't know this, but you'd have to think somebody clearly had it out for Gruden, because I think there was a few 100,000 emails, and the only ones that get leaked involve John Gruden and Bruce Allen. So I'm not going to suggest who it was, because I don't know. I don't know if it was Snyder. I don't know if it was somebody in the league.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it was over 600,000 emails, if I remember correctly. It's some ridiculous number. And, you got the one guy, not saying what he did was right, because I'm not going to sit here and justify any of that. But
he's not the only one that did something wrong.
That's as simple as
there's no condoning anything that Gruden wrote in there about African Americans, about women, about
homosexuals,
exactly,
LGBTQ community. Yeah, he destroyed those emails. I mean, I don't like to use this terminology, but he pulled the Archie Bunker. He just made sure he didn't like anybody, so he let you know how he felt about everybody.
Here's the thing. I mean, somebody who thinks like that obviously cannot be in a position of power in the NFL as a head coach. I mean, how do you walk into an NFL locker room, which is the epitome of a melting pot, especially
on his team where he has, I believe, the only currently openly homosexual NFL player. I mean, you want to talk about covering everything. he's got it all on his team. He's got women that probably work in that organization, right?
Of course.
He's got, obviously, as we just mentioned, a homosexual man on his team, and there's nothing wrong with that. Good for him. I think it's great that he's open about it. I know it's hard for people to do that. And obviously he's got mixed races on that team. There's probably more than just whites and blacks. I don't know the ins and outs of every player, but it covers a lot. You can't have a man of that caliber and position with the opinions that he has. Of course, I agree.
The only thing I will say in his defense, and it has nothing to do with the content of the emails because that's indefensible, is that he was writing what he considered to be a private email to a friend. These emails had zero to do with the Washington investigation. Okay. Again, I'm not defending anything that was in the emails, and I'm glad it came out because it should have. If this is how he thinks, then he should have been fired, and he was fired. But you do have to think to a certain degree. Was it an invasion of his privacy that these emails came out in this investigation, and that had nothing to do with the investigation? And at some point, it will be disclosed somehow. Somebody's going to come up with this. Who actually, made those, who sent them first to the Wall Street Journal and then the New York Times? Somebody obviously with a huge vendetta against Jon Gruden, because I have to think, just because of the enormous number of emails, that there had to be some other stuff in there that would be very damaging to lots of people. And I don't even know who those people would be, but
just more of averages there would have to be. Even if
when people are writing emails, when people are writing emails that they consider to be private and to their friends, who knows what they would have said. Now, the stupidity of all this is, why was he communicating with Bruce Allen on Bruce Allen's Washington, at the time, WashingtonRedskins.com email address? I mean, when you're going to be writing stuff like that, you got to make sure that there's no way it can be traced. And, they weren't going into any of these people's, it was all team emails. As far as I know, if somebody had a Gmail account, they weren't going into that and reading those. It was just the stuff that was written on the team email site. And that's how this all came about. That's how they became part of this treasure trove of emails. And somewhere along the way, somebody was reading these things and put, Gruden over here, Gruden over here, Gruden over here, and then they just leaked them for whatever their motivation was.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of really crazy. Just to change topics, I have two outside, Washington questions. I know you're from New York. Daniel Jones, a lot of news out today. They shut him down for the rest of the year, and their talk about how he didn't get a fair shake and his future, they were hoping to have an answer if they wanted to keep him or not. There's a lot of uncertainty whether he's the guy. What do you think from what you've seen so far?
I've seen a lot of good stuff and more bad stuff, and I think he throws it really well. He's a very good athlete. He's a much better athlete than Eli, and from what if you watch the Giants in his 3 years that he's been there. He's done it he's had to play despite not having an offensive line that's of NFL caliber. It's very difficult. Even if you have the best skill position players around you, if you don't have an offensive line, they can give you the time to throw the ball. It doesn't make a difference. So he's had a crappy offensive line. Saquon hasn't done anything since his rookie year. Not his fault. He just keeps getting hurt. And maybe that's who he is, that he's just going to be one of those players. It's a shame because he was so dynamic as a rookie. I thought it was a mistake to take him where they took him, because I think the history now is showing that there's such a short shelf life on running backs that you can't invest the second pick in the draft on a guy who might only last 4 years. And in Saquon's case, he's had one good year and 3 injury years. Giant defense has been very spotty. So I don't think Jones has been in a position that we can make a definitive judgment on him because he hasn't had the pieces around. The coaching the last 2 years has been horrific offensively. I mean, they can't get in the end zone. I think the Jets dumped Darnold after 3 years. I said prior to the draft, I thought that was a mistake, that guys like Zach Wilson come along every year, and he's been very unimpressive this year, obviously. I thought the Jets' better play was to take that second pick and trade it down a couple of times, because teams wanted to trade up for quarterbacks in this past draft. And when we saw that, I thought the Jets should have, traded down twice, try to build a team around Darnold. And if he had a bad year this year, then figure it out. But I didn't think Zach Wilson was the kind of quarterback. I would have done it for Trevor Lawrence. I wouldn't have done it for Zach Wilson. I thought they would have been better off keeping Sam and turn that into use that second pick and almost turn it into a cottage industry. Trade down to 4, trade down to 8, get a couple
Almost
of
like the Bill Belichick draft system, basically.
Yeah. And I look at Bell. Like, I'm not a huge Mac Jones guy. I think he's just a really good game manager. He's a smart kid. He throws it okay.
He just fell in the right system.
Exactly.
He fell in the right system.
That's what I've said.
It's a familiarity piece. Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick saw Mac Jones. What they saw in him was, this is a guy in our system who we could make look like the guy who was with us for 2 decades, who is the greatest of all time.
And it's also because of Belichick's relationship with Nick Saban.
Of course.
He knew everything he needed to know.
Absolutely.
Mac Jones and knew he'd be a really good fit. And he does have a lot of the Brady qualities. There's never going to be a story like Brady again. And Brady was a 6th-round pick. This guy was a 1st-round pick. But he does bring a lot of the same intangibles to the team, to the locker room, to the field. Brady has a deceivingly strong arm. That's what people never have realized about him over the last 20 years. And it got stronger as he got older, which is amazing. Didn't look so good the other night, but he was back to being with, like he was in New England the last couple of years, without any skill position players because they all got hurt. And how about Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell being reunited in Tampa now? Isn't that great?
The irony of it.
What a story that is. But so getting back to Daniel Jones, I think he deserves another year. Giants have 2 picks in the top 10. Now, I will say this. If you can get Russell Wilson for one of those 2 picks and then some other stuff, I think Wilson is one of those guys that can play into his 40s.
Russ is coming to Philly. It's okay. He don't need to go to New York.
Please, no.
Well, maybe
Russ is coming
perhaps,
to Philly.
You never know. I mean, I'm not positive. I'm not convinced that Seattle's going to trade him, but
we'll see.
Yeah, the Giants are in a good position if he's made available in a trade because they have a lot of draft pieces that they can send to Seattle. And Seattle's trying to recoup, after losing giving up the 2 number 1s to the Jets for Jamal Adams, a trade that, they probably like to have a do-over on. But, so I would give, if you can't get a guy like Russell Wilson at a reasonable price, and that Aaron Rodgers isn't coming here, and Deshaun Watson is not coming here, then I would just take those 2 1s, take the 2 best players you can at that spot, or maybe trade down and get some more. Giants need lots of players.
We need a lot of offensive line players. How about that?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Give me an offensive line, I'll feel better.
Why bring
they won't go wrong
to a team that doesn't have an offensive line when he's already on a team that doesn't have an offensive line?
Well, yeah, that's true.
Unless you plan on rebuilding that line to protect him, Russ ain't coming to the Giants. Let me just say that right now.
Eric, I don't disagree with that, and he's going to be in position to kind of pick his spot because of there's a bunch of money on his contract, and I don't know if he has a no trade clause or a limited trade. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is, but Seattle's not trading him any place he doesn't want to go because and that's just going to be a problem. But if the Giants come out of the draft and just in the 1st round picks with a pass rusher and a stud offensive lineman, then they're taking a huge step forward towards becoming a respectable team again. But we don't even know who's going to be making the picks for the Giants at this point.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to wait and see on that. Now, my next question was, all right, it's Tuesday night. We have football on because of COVID. The NFL made all sorts of schedule changes, which they weren't too keen on doing throughout the year. And the whole COVID situation's popping back up. It's getting pretty bad with the new Omicron variant. How do you think the NFL handled it, especially with the Bears last night having so many people in the protocol having trouble, fielding a quality team? And they played a decent game. They were in the game, I didn't get a chance to watch it, but basically for everything I've seen, the referees kind of cost them. And I mean, you can't blame the referees, but having that and having trouble putting a team on the field at the same time, what's your overall opinion of what the NFL's been doing with this whole?
Well, I mean, just look what's going on tonight. Garrett Gilbert has started for Washington. 5 days ago, he was on New England's practice squad. And now he's starting a really important game with playoff implications. They extended the Washington game went from Sunday to Tuesday to try to give Washington a chance to get some players back. That didn't happen at quarterback. It didn't happen for the Browns on Monday night. They couldn't get either one of their quarterbacks back on the field, even though the game was, pushed back 24 hours. Unless the NFL actually takes a pause right now and lets the players who are in the protocol give them a chance to test negative, and then institute all these different kinds of protocols and rules and regulations to try to do everything they can to keep these teams healthy down the stretch. Unless they were to do something like that, literally take a pause for a week and give teams a chance to get healthy. Unless they do that, this is going to be an issue. It appears now every week through until the Super Bowl in the middle of February, because this variant is apparently not as dangerous as the first time around, but much more contagious. And the numbers are just mind-boggling. I mean, all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks, it seems, teams are putting between 5 and 10 players on the COVID list every week.
Yeah, we're up to 140. Last time that I saw, I think we have 140 NFL players currently on that list. And it's one of those where I agree with you, Gary, as far as a solution. However, we know the business that is the NFL. They're not going to lose money. And they're like, listen, if you can put X number of players on the field, you're playing. It doesn't matter the name on the back of the jersey.
They wouldn't necessarily lose money, because if they eventually play the games, then all their TV money is intact and their ticket revenue is intact. Moving the Super Bowl back would be, that's quite an undertaking. But they also have that 1 week to play with between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl, that if need be, they can push everything back a week and eliminate that off week. They've done that before. They did that in 2001, the 9/11 year. That year I think they pushed the Super Bowl in New Orleans back a week. I think that's what happened. So they have a little bit of flexibility in that regard. But to this point, they've shown no inclination to do much more than push games as far back as perhaps Wednesday, because that's what they did last year. That Pittsburgh-Baltimore game was originally the Thanksgiving night game, if you remember, and it wound up getting played the following Wednesday. So Wednesday is about as far as you can go and then still have a team play on Sunday. Because if my math is right, that's the same as playing Sunday, Thursday, Wednesday, Sunday. I think it's the same number of days.
Yep, same amount of days. Yep, you're correct.
Yep.
So it's going to be very interesting to see how they maneuver their way through the last 3 weeks of the regular season and then the playoffs. But, I mean, can you imagine a conference championship game or just a playoff game? And some team has to sign a quarterback off the street to start.
Not a good look at all.
No, they really did.
No.
They got to figure out a way to do something. I understand it's a tough situation. It's something that they've only been dealing with for the last year and a half. It's not something that's been around for 40 years that they've had to worry about. But if you're going to talk about player safety, and this is important, that's their biggest thing is player safety besides making money. Because we all know making money is number one.
Of course, always will be.
You can't say that player safety is a very, very high on the list when we're not, worried about a team that has 19 guys in the COVID protocol still going to go out and play a game.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are concerned about the players. Obviously, all these owners want as much money as possible, but I don't think they take the player safety aspect of this lightly. One thing to consider here is whether a team – Eric, I guess you're an Eagles fan from what you said before.
I am.
If you remember last year that the Eagles had Josh McCown as their COVID quarterback, kept him in Texas away from the team, and if need be, they could have flown him in because he finished the previous season with him and he knew the offense. I would not be shocked now if some of these teams that are going to be in the playoffs or fighting for a playoff spot now, if they try to keep their backup quarterback away from the team. At this point in the season, they've all practiced enough. Aaron Rodgers, when he was on the COVID list, now it's Aaron Rodgers, he did the walkthrough on Saturday and played on Sunday, and he hadn't practiced for the previous 10 days. It might be in these teams' best interest to kind of stash their backup quarterback away from the team just to make sure they don't have to go out and sign a Garrett Gilbert type to start a playoff game. I'll be interested to see if that discussion starts anytime soon.
Would be a good idea. All right. Either any of you guys have anything else? JB or Eric, any more questions for Gary?
That was great. So, Gary, when's the book supposed to come out? What's the tentative date?
August 9th of 2022. People can pre-order it now on Amazon or wherever. It's called Surviving Washington. If you go on Amazon and look at the cover, you'll buy the book. It's really one of the coolest covers that I've seen on a sports book in a long time. They really did a great job with it. And I will tell you this, the title was Robert's idea.
Love that.
Very cool. I can't wait to read it. I'm excited. I love your work. Like I said, I've been following you for years. It was a pleasure having you on. You're always welcome to come back, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Well, great. It's nice to see you guys, and take care, and Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays.
You too, Gary. Thank you.
Happy holidays, Gary. Thank you for everything.
Take
Gary,
care, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Take care. All right, gentlemen. We got about 15 minutes, give or take, left. Gary was fantastic, but plenty more to talk about, JB.
First of all, it's Tuesday night. There's football on. I know we don't usually get it tonight because our shows air. But, I'm sure if you're not watching us, you're playing Score No Score, our great sponsor.
Absolutely.
Download on
I'm
the
doing
app
it on my
store.
phone as we speak.
I haven't done it because I was doing some research on Daniel Jones because I'm a Giant fan. And, I think he's not.
Painful. That's painful.
Gary says other things, and Gary knows the NFL. It was an honor to have him here. But make sure you play it Score No Score every time you see football, come baseball. And it's going to be rolling out to other sports. So get in on it now. Get in there, play. You'll see us in there. John, who's not here tonight. Maybe he took the night off to play Score No Score. It wouldn't be shocking. He's just sneaky like that.
Wouldn't put it past him. I would love that. Are you kidding me?
That's what I should have done. But I knew Gary was coming on, and I love Gary.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, I was multitasking. I had my phone in my hand. I was doing a little bit of both. You had no idea. I'm good.
What else is going on in the world of sports besides everything's starting to shut down? The NHL's kaput now. For a couple of days. The Olympics
going to take about a week off. Yep.
Yeah, the NHL Olympics is kind of done.
Yep, they're not going to be playing there. I mean, we didn't get to talk about it. Eric, I think you guys spoke about this. I don't think it was a sports arena. You may have done it on the sports arena. I'm not sure, but I believe you did its own show about Urban Meyer fired as of last Wednesday?
Last Wednesday
Thursday?
morning.
Wednesday, okay.
12:30 in the morning. Yeah. So We did it on
one of the
Alex
best things I've
Fleming.
heard in a while.
We did it on Alex Fleming's NFL Carousel that Thursday night because
That's what it was. Okay.
Our brother Alex, rest in peace, he covered the team, and there was a lot that he couldn't say while being in the room.
Right.
You know what I mean? As a media and as a journalist, you have to pick and choose what you say very carefully.
100%.
But we all know Alex was never one to hold his tongue. He just elocuted words in such a manner that it just made you think. What we did was we let y'all know what Alex really wanted to say about Jacksonville, more specifically about Urban Meyer and what was happening. So, we took that whole entire show just to talk about that because there was so much to unpack. Excuse me. But listen, I said he should have been gone long before this time.
I agree.
There are those who disagreed. I heard Michael Vick say that Urban Meyer should have been able to finish the season because even though we may have seen it as his time was up, there might have still been time to fix the situation there in Jacksonville. But Shad Khan, the owner, he made the decision. And, the sad part about the situation from my perspective and in my opinion is he's going to get a job somewhere else down
100%.
the road, back on the college level. And once he starts winning again, all of this is just going to go by the wayside. And that's a shame. That really is.
The good news is, since he kicked Josh Lambo, that article came out. His lawyer said it was true today. He did an article that did happen after he denied it. So I'm a little confused how you deny something and then your lawyer says it happened. That's not the guy who should be saying it happened if it happened after you denied it. That just makes you look really bad. What kind of toxic situation was it down there? And besides for that, he now has more time to get a Manscaped package. He could use code SSN to go on Manscaped. Get a nice package like you did last time we had you on.
I love that.
I like how that's where this went. Not, he's got time to fix himself and work on what he did. No.
Well,
let's talk about the really what matters here.
He was going out to dinner, dancing with young women. You want to be properly groomed.
Fair enough.
You need your ball deodorant, your ball toner, your shaver. Use code SSN to get 20% off. Got to pay the bills. But seriously, what is he doing? Kicking players? How do you do that as a
that's
head
just
coach in the NFL?
That's legitimately that's assault. That maybe it's defined as battery, but whatever legally it's described as is beyond me. I don't know the difference between those things, and I don't really care to know because the point is he physically hurt another person. That's ridiculous. The whole situation was a mess. We said from the beginning when the whole thing with him in the bar and that young lady, that was a bad start. That was, to say the least, yes. But that was one of those moments. Start
was him bringing in a racist coach from that used to work with him. That was his first red flag.
You got a point.
The second red flag, and this is no disrespect to Tim Tebow, but you're bringing a guy who hasn't played in the league in 7-8 years, asking him to play a position he's never played before.
Right.
And I even gave him the benefit of the doubt when he did that in saying Trevor Lawrence is the new kid. Tim can shoulder some of that media and he could also learn. But it was a blunder. It was
stupid. It didn't accomplish anything.
So that was number two. And then the laundry list of stuff that he has done and trying to, Urban Meyer has a college football coach mentality. He does not have an NFL football coach mentality. It takes a certain individual to lead grown men. And Urban Meyer ain't that dude.
But you see the difference is being in the NFL, all that stuff got called out and brought to the attention of us. Mm-hmm. If he's in Ohio State or an LSU or, one of those schools, we're never going to hear about all these misgivings. It's going to be like, oh, we won on Saturday. We're going to the playoffs. We're ranked 5th. That's all they care about. so they get away with a lot more. You can't do that in the NFL.
Exactly.
It's not acceptable. And I mean, even in college, it should not be acceptable. But unfortunately, there's a lot more of that goes around. And you get a guy like that has no business coaching anywhere.
I agree.
You know,
the problem is, no matter what we say, how ridiculous all this was. I mean, he verbally abused his coaches. He verbally abused a player, as we just talked about. He physically assaulted a player. I mean, what feels like a million other things. But those are just like, the past week and a half, 2 weeks leading up to him getting fired, that he did those few things I just mentioned. That alone should disqualify him from ever coaching ever again. But the problem is, and Eric, you're 1,000% correct, he's going to get a job. I give him a couple months before he gets his next, at least an offer. Maybe not an accepted job, but an offer to coach somewhere.
He'll get offered to coach, without a doubt. If he wants to coach, he'll have a job.
Exactly, and he shouldn't be allowed to, and that's the problem.
Which is completely wrong. When there are guys, coordinators in the NFL that the enemy. I mean, that dude should be a head coach 4 times over again, and he doesn't have a job, and we can get into that topic and be on that topic for days because it's wrong how he doesn't have a job,
Yeah.
But you get guys like Urban Meyer who assault players allegedly, and I mean his lawyer said it, so I guess it's true.
I guess you can say it. If they've said he did this, then
he left his team, after a game, which we've asked other coaches on this program. That's unheard of.
Yeah,
to do that. You don't go and leave your team after a game.
Absolutely.
And this isn't coming from J.B. Ellis or Eric Wilson, Jake Malik. No, this is coming from guys that have coached in the league.
Right.
But this guy, because he has a track record of winning in college, where the misgivings are forgiven, he gets away with it. It's horrible.
That's exactly it.
I mean, and honestly, the fact that the man had the audacity to go up to his coaches, his assistant coaches, the guy that coaches along with him, and basically tell me why you deserve your job, why you're basically prove your value. I mean, how
you hired him?
You
hired him. So how you gonna ask a man to show him your credentials when you looked at his credentials and you
said,
brought him
you're hired?
Then you're gonna ask. Then you're gonna sit there and turn around and be like, "Well, why are you on my squad? Because you let me in."
I mean, look, this is a problem that stems much farther than Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer just perpetuated it. He made it worse, and that's it. Because I think a lot of people know that the culture in Jacksonville is not great. They have no winning culture right now, which is part of the problem. They've had one fluke season. The owner, I mean, I don't intend to badmouth anybody, but he's not the best owner to have.
So you're saying 2017 was a fluke, Jake? That's what you're saying?
Yeah. When you see, I don't mean it to take anything away, but I say that because have they repeated anything near that success with a quite similar team the next year after? No. Right? And they didn't. I believe the year before they had a pretty similar team as well. I don't remember, so I'm just saying this based on I don't remember any big signings.
I get what you're saying.
Right? It happened. They just had one big year. Just like the Giants, for example, I believe it was 2016. That was the year of the boat incident, right? But that season, to me, that was a fluke. It was a team that they played well. They maybe their schedule was easy. I don't remember what it was. I have no idea. But they played well for one set of one period of time, and that was it. But before that and after that has been a mess. Okay, before the boat incident, the last good season we had were winning the Super Bowl in 11. I believe that was 2011, 2012, or was it 10, 11? But whatever. That time period, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And before that, we weren't even that great because we'd won one Super Bowl prior to that. But again, it wasn't like this insane success. But those were a couple good years. But you take that, then you go to the year of the boat. It wasn't great, those years leading up, right? And then the years after, they haven't been good either. So I mean to say that the Jags are not the only team, but that's another example of it was clearly just it was 1 year. A team played well, things were working. It was 1 year. That's all it is.
Okay.
They don't have a winning culture and things need to be fixed. I'm not saying that the owner is the only thing at fault, but things need to be fixed because there's clearly, it's not just, the coach that comes in, because who hires the coach? The guys above him. And that's part of a culture problem, is usually the guys above him. And it's clear that there are some problems in Jacksonville. And we talked about culture problems basically this entire show. I think it's pretty clear. Obviously, it's not as bad, but it's definitely things are not good in Jacksonville.
Okay.
To me, that's the problem with revenue sharing in the NFL, the way it's done, is you have a team like Jacksonville where, I don't know if the incentive by, Mr. Khan is to win games. I don't know.
He's a businessman first.
He's very lenient. Even a couple of days before they went ahead and fired Urban,
he said, "I will be thinking about this heavily." Things to that effect. Yeah,
he likes to stick with his coach and give him a chance. Which I do agree. You have to give coaches a chance. You can't be quick-handed and get rid of guys their first year usually. But there were red flags, and with Urban Meyer, the red flags were there. So I think you got to make that decision right away.
Right.
But I don't know if you got to get the right people in places to run the organization.
I agree.
Speaking of which, I got to ask you, Jay. The Mets went out and hired Buck Showalter this week. Great hiring. I mean, the guy gets the most out of young players. He wears on teams after a while. He's not a long-term guy. He's not going to last there a decade.
Right.
But right now, with Steve Cohen trying to make the Mets the relevant team in New York, do you think this was the right move for them?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, Showalter, I think, was a clear choice to be somebody's manager. It was just a matter of who hired them, or rather, who hired him. I think it's great. I love what Cohen's doing with the Mets. He's went out. He's signed great free agents. He's made good trades. He's getting a lead guy that's experienced, and I think will get the best out of his players, or at least do his darndest to do so. He's gonna fight for his players, which I think is one of the most important things any coach, manager, anything in any sport can do. Showalter is known. He will go out and he will argue. He will fight for his players, and I love that. And I think that is how you build a winning culture, and that's how you build a positive culture in a team. Is he's not the perfect example, but he's a good example, right? A coach that's going to back his players. He's going to be hard on you if he has to, but he's also going to be honest with you, and he's going to back you if he's got to. And I love the hiring. I think I'm not saying it's going to make the Mets, put them over the top all of a sudden. It's going to take the team playing well and other factors, obviously. It takes a bunch of things to make them play right and be good. But I love this hiring. I think it was great, and I appreciate that. Even as a Yankee fan, and I know the Mets are the other New York team, I appreciate that they're trying to make the right moves to improve this roster. And this team. I think it's the right thing to do.
I think we're another step going backwards towards '86 when the Mets ruled New York, and it was sickening.
Could be.
I do not look forward to it. Steve Cohen is doing a hell of a job as an owner. He makes me think of George Steinbrenner every day.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't rant as much in the newspapers, but he's got that type of ownership where he
gets it done so far.
He's going to do whatever he can do to make his team better. It won't always work, but he's out there trying to do it, and I respect that.
But at the very least, you can say he's trying, which is not all of it, but that's half the battle, is going out there at least giving it a try. All right. Anything else, guys, before we wrap things up? I know it was a long interview and then a kind of shorter segment on everything else, but do we have anything quickly we want to add before we wrap this up?
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Yes.
We're in the fourth quarter right now. Philly is up by 10, and I'm very thankful that Slay was able to stop their tight end from scoring right there. So we'll see what happens. But this is a game that we can't lose, because I'm gonna have to listen to John and especially my man Ty Ray from Say What, Say It Again, because he was the only one to pick Washington last night on the Sports Arena. So I got to hear it from them if the Eagles don't pull this out. Plus, I won't be sleeping if that happens, because I'll probably break a few things before the holidays. But, Merry Christmas to you guys, as always.
Yes.
Thank you so much for always having me on. I appreciate it. Shameless plug. Monday, Wednesday night, part of the Sideline Sports Network family, the Sports Arena, 10 p.m. with myself, Jon Shearer, Mike Carrottenuto, Ty Ray, and our girl, Miss Megan Price, our queen of hoops. So,
yep. JB, shout it out. What do you got?
So Monday we got the NBA Carousel with Megan Price. We got our show Tuesdays. Thursdays we got the NFL Carousel. We're on DB&A television right now every night. Plenty of ways to see us. We write for the Inscriber magazine, sports sections by Sideline Sports. There's so much going on. We're everywhere.
Everywhere.
You never know where we're going to be, guys.
Absolutely.
You know?
JB, you hit most of it. Only other things, as you see across the bottom of the screen, Instagram, Twitter, Sideline Sport 1, YouTube, Facebook is Sideline Sports. We got groups, pages, all that. DB&A television. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TikTok. You name it, we're there. Look us up. You'll find us.
Make 2 things before we go, housekeeping.
Yes.
Make sure Surviving Washington. Go on Amazon. Order that now.
Absolutely.
Make sure Gary knows you got it. Secondly, before you sit down for your NFL games and you get the Score No Score app up, make sure you go to manscaped.com. Use code SSN. You need your shaver. You need your ball deodorant, your ball toner. It's important. Get it done before the holidays.
And last but not least, everybody from myself, JB, Eric, John, who couldn't be here, the whole Sideline Sports Network and our family of shows and people, happy holidays. If you're celebrating, Merry Christmas. If not, we'll see you next time we do our show. But in advance, if we're seeing it now, Happy New Year. Everybody be healthy, stay safe, have a good holidays, whatever you're doing. We'll see you next time.
Happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy
Merry
New Year.
Christmas.